that I can't.
Welcome to A Fine Time for Healing, which is my podcast that I've been doing for over 12 years. And I have interviewed over 500 guests in those 12 years. I love doing this because it's just so interesting to me. But A Fine Time for Healing is a place for your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. That's why you're here. Today, I have a really interesting guest for you. Today, we're going to be talking about how the teenage brain was actually physiologically aged during the pandemic or because of the pandemic. And this is a topic that is very similar to what I talk about a lot, about the damage that happens to our brains when we are under long periods of stress. So today we have with us Dr. Kathryn Smerling. Dr. Smerling is a collaborative and dynamic psychotherapist who specializes in creating healthy and meaningful relationships. She works with individuals and families in all phases of life, crisis-related or otherwise. Her extensive professional and educational experience has developed her working knowledge of a broad range of techniques, allowing her to creatively tailor sessions to meet the specific needs of her clients. Welcome to A Fine Time for Healing, Kathryn.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Randi, for having me.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to have you. I really do love this topic, and I'm real curious to hear what you have to say about this. Is it just teenagers that are affected by this?
No, not at all. There are kids that we now call COVID babies that have not socialized. This is the first time they're socializing in 2-3 years, where the normal kind of thing is to take a baby class and to see people and to interact socially. This is the first time children, babies from 1 to 2, are socializing at all in a gym class, in a conversation class, in a rock and roll and baby class, at the parks, because we didn't have that for 2.5 years. Since March of 2020, we did not have the ability to socialize. And I think for the teenagers, they did not have the ability to interact in a way that was meaningful. Working on a screen and working from home is not a way to remove stress and to really be in an atmosphere where you can learn. Remember that high school is also a social developmental laboratory. They did not have that, and they were stressed, and they still are stressed. In fact, the New York Post, not that I believe everything that the New York Post said, but they said that yesterday there was an increase in teenage murders by teenagers. Matter of fact, I have the exact, because I was so struck by this. It says shocking 161 murder suspects in 2022 were minors, double the number from 2019.
Wow.
So that shows that we are losing a whole, we're losing almost a generation to violence and to lack of social communication. And this is largely due to the pandemic, not totally, but it is.
Wow, that is so frightening to know that it's promoting criminality. And now, so you've explained how the stress has affected them so powerfully. How does it age the mind?
Stress ages the mind. I mean, those people that live the longest and are the happiest are those that have been able to externalize the stress, but not internalize it. those people in Greece and in Italy, they're the longest living people. They don't have that same kind of stress in their life, and they also have a very active social connection. One of the things that does age the brain is isolation and a lack of social connection.
Wow.
And people that are active and socially connected to people of all ages, not only teenagers, but people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, grandparents, have a much less stressful life. When you're alone and you're isolated and you're frustrated, you have a tendency to get angry and to get isolated, and isolation is not good for your mental health. They are finding that healthy relationships is the thing that leads to longevity. There was just a study, I believe it was Wadlinger at Harvard, that just had a study that showed that people with healthy relationships living the longest and they're the happiest.
And so, I mean, that really makes sense, because I think most of us realize that if an elderly person is alone, that they're not going to live as long as if they are socialized and visited and loved and, you know, treated well. So I guess it's really kind of the same thing. So one of the studies that you cite showed that when comparing the MRI scans of a group of 128 children, half before the pandemic and half at the end of the first year, there was growth in the hippocampus and amygdala. When that happens, what occurs?
Growth in the hippocampus and the amygdala are the things that create more stress. Okay, and those are the areas of the brain that highlight stress, and that means that there's growth in the area of stress and unhappiness and depression more than is usual.
And this is something that can be seen on scans.
Yes, of course it can be. It can be seen on scans, and that's why this new brain imaging is so exciting. It's such an exciting tool that we mental health professionals have in order to elucidate some of the things that we didn't know about before. It's a very powerful tool.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah,
It's been long needed.
it's amazing, and it's very much needed. And I think that the areas that of organization, which is the prefrontal cortex, really need to be strengthened also. And that is a way that we can work now with the younger children, because they are not as organized as the children pre-pandemic. They're just not as organized. They don't have as many experiences. Their language may be delayed. There are a lot of things that go into the first 5 years of life. And when you're isolated during the portion of that period of life, you don't end up with a jump start that others had before you. And I think it's the same thing with the teenagers. They have been isolated and angry and frustrated, and also not believing our public leaders. There isn't a lot of kindness in the world right now.
Right.
And I think that they are picking up on that, on the violence that the world is perpetrating. I'm a big believer in kindness is intentional and playing kindness forward. And if you are kind to someone, they will play it forward and be kind to another person. I think we're lacking that. I think that we're lacking that in the world, in our sensibilities. And I think that our emotional development is just as important as our academic development. And there should be more emphasis on that in the schools.
I 100% agree with you. There's a huge mental health component that is missing from the school system, from the educational system.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is as important as all these subjects that they're teaching that some kids can't even relate to. But many are dealing with problems outside of school, from their home, their family, um, whatever is going on, and they don't know how to deal with this.
Nope.
And there really is no resources for them, because the school psychologist, often they don't want to go to the school psychologist because there's a stigma attached to that for them, but they're still not going to get the tools that they need, right?
Well, absolutely. First of all, you mentioned something, Randi, which is so near to my heart. We have to remove the stigma from getting mental health help. I think that the wise people in the world have gotten mental health help. The people that are not wise have not gotten mental health. And this is, I'm not making a blanket message that everyone has to go seek therapy, but to learn about yourself and learn about the way people interact and people interrelate is a very important skill to have. And one of the things that you specialize in, which is narcissism, is the lack of relational ability. So, it's really important that people learn. Maybe it has to be a very cognitive thing, that they learn how to relate so that they can get along better in the world. Mm-hmm. And this comes from early childhood. This comes right from the playground.
Well, we know that narcissistic personality is formed in childhood, formed yes. before the age of 18. And it's usually a maladaptive coping mechanism on steroids, really. It's they can't cope with their environment and they just take on this false self, and that's it. That's what they show in life. I deal mostly with the victims of this and survivors of this, which are, they come to me completely broken. It's awful. It's awful what these people do. But, if schools focused on teaching children how to cope, how to navigate life in a healthy way, these kind of things wouldn't happen.
It beats a calculus as far as I'm concerned, and calculus is just as important, but it really teaches kids how to cope and how to be resilient. And that's what we are not teaching our children right now. We are not teaching them emotional resilience, what to do with frustrations, what to do with wanting things and not being able to get them. That's what all these murders are about. They're reflexive, reactive experiences to frustration and anger. And very many teenagers have not yet developed the part of the brain that is able to control your reactions. And in fact, in men, boys, it's not fully developed until 26 or 27. Now, what are we doing with all of this information that we have? Why aren't we looking at this carefully so that we can make some social change? Because otherwise we are going to have a very divided, which we do already, but certainly a very divided community.
Yeah, so true. It's really difficult to get hierarchies to change and move forward and things like that. Systems, especially government systems, it's very hard to get change in that.
Yeah. One of the things that I do enjoy most about my work is that when I can get people to understand that reciprocity is probably the most important skill that you can have in forming relationships. In other words, stop thinking about yourself and understand what the other person needs to maybe make an inroad into communication. Mm-hmm. I love seeing someone's face light up and say, wow, that I could do that. I can really do that. So that's exciting to me. If we can do it on the ground with one-on-one, we can do it in more ways than we can possibly imagine.
Another thing that I think helps people move out of their own heads is gratitude. Yeah. Sometimes if somebody is really stuck, I'm like, in this week, before you see me again, I want you to just focus on gratitude, nothing else. Just look around, be grateful for everything that you have. It helps take the focus off of yourself.
Right.
And yeah.
Do you know, very often I recommend that my clients and people I work with volunteer and do something else for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Because that does make you forget about yourself. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can look to see how your kindness and giving to other people is a way for you to get over your own depression, maybe more people will do that. As a matter of fact, there was a study that just came out last week from Ohio State University, in which they had 3 groups of people who were depressives. And I think one was on medication and one did a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And then the other group was told to go out and do things for other people, to spread kindness around. It turns out that the group that was spreading kindness developed more higher dopamine levels than the other 2 groups. So doing things for other people is a very worthwhile experience for yourself as well as others, because it does relieve depression.
You're right. It really does. That's such great advice. What has happened to, we know what's going on with the children. They've been isolated. What is happening with adults, and why are we all so anxious and angry and stressed? Why is this happening?
I think people are incredibly uneasy. First of all, for many couples, whether married or not, they spent a lot of time together during the pandemic. And now they have gone off and they're starting to develop their parallel lives once again. And they're beginning to see that maybe things aren't the way they thought they would be. There are very few people that have the same relationship now as they did before the pandemic. The pandemic has changed everyone and changed the way we relate as a family and couples. It has done some wonderful things in that people did value and are valuing now, I hope, family dinners and a chance to do things together as a family and enjoy your family instead of finding as though it's a burden. But there are no families that have come out of the pandemic without scars. There just have not been. And those scars are real. People, a lot of people have lost jobs. The stock market is incredibly volatile. The inflation that's going on now it makes people uneasy. And there are a whole bunch of things, that are making things hard for people to relax, really, rich or poor. And, of course, when you have money, you can escape some of the problems that you have. But people who have money are still very uneasy and very anxious. And, I think the whole country is going through a transition period, hopefully to something better than it was, but a transition period to try and trust your public leaders, for which people do not now.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Things are strange, very strange right now. It's very hard to get your equilibrium right now. Nothing is as it was. Nothing is predictable. It's very strange.
And look at California with 3 mass shootings over the last week. And that's scary. I mean, these have been residential areas that have been traditionally quiet and friendly. And now there are mass shootings there. It's very disconcerting and very anxiety provoking.
Of course, no one is safe.
Yeah.
That in itself is a very difficult thing to live with, to not feel safe.
Yes.
I think you have to feel safe in order to be emotionally healthy. And so you know, everybody's walking around looking over their shoulders. You just don't know what's going to happen next.
Mhm. I know I live in New York City, and I am so grateful to the policemen and security that we now have in our subways that I make a point of saying thank you when I'm standing waiting for a subway and I see the policeman there, because it has been violent in the subways. And at least that's one part of New York which has showed a force so that people feel safer, which I think is very important and very important for our own mental health, as you have said, Randi.
Right. I was unaware. My daughter rides the subway. She lives in Manhattan. My phone keeps ringing. I thought I turned down the ringer. Anyway, um, she lives in the Upper West Side, and so she rides the subway. And I've been so nervous about it because of the things that we've been hearing. But I'm really glad to hear that they have security now.
Oh, there's security all around the subways, honestly. I don't do anything that's unsafe, and there is security now, where wasn't about 2 months ago.
Oh, so it's just in the last 2 months. Yeah, I mean, if you can't ride the subway, you're paralyzed.
In New York, yes.
Nobody has a car. Um, so what is the physiological? So we know that stress. You say I have in my notes that there's a growth in the hippocampus and amygdala, and why do they enlarge?
Through stress. You know, our body is the most incredible integrated system, and you can't feel stress and not have it affect other parts of your body.
Right.
You know, you just don't do that. There are people, sometimes people blank out because they're so anxious that they can't talk. Well, that affects your ability to process language, affects your body. And this is, I mean, we can't just have a pain one part of our body and it not affect the other part. We are a beautifully integrated system. And if you feel stressed, you're going to feel it in your stomach. You're going to feel it in achy bones. You're going to feel it in tight muscles. You're going to feel it as from a headache. You're going to feel it all different places. And that's why I think exercise and walking is so important, because that does relieve the somatic stress. It really does.
So, I guess I asked that question about the enlarging because I know that in the studies that were done with children who grew up with anger in their homes, their hippocampus actually was smaller. So, right? So, why is it larger in this case? Do you know? Did I stump you?
No, I think, I'm very well educated, but I'm not a medical doctor.
Okay.
That's something which I will actually ask as soon as we get off the website.
Okay, great. I didn't mean to stump you, but thank you.
No, but I am also curious to know, and that's something that I'm not familiar with. So I'm going to be honest and say I'm going to do some research.
Good for you. You can let me know. Um, what else is going on with our children and our teenagers? How are they dealing with school and the academics and things like that? I mean, we know that their social life was drastically affected. Is it impacting their academics?
I think yes. First of all, I think colleges now are looking for you know, unique individuals that have been able to overcome hardships in their lives,
Mm.
and not just people that have been spoon-fed throughout their lives. As a matter of fact, there are a number of colleges that have stopped all legacies from being able to get early entrance.
Really? Like
Yes,
Ivy Leagues?
Ivy Leagues.
Really?
Princeton,
Wow.
yes. Hmm. And so I think that the game has changed. And I think that kids now are trying to keep up with the game or keep up with the changing game. The other thing is that there are lots of pressures on them. The educational aspects of their lives were absolutely stultified by the pandemic, because no one learns better online constantly than being able to sit down and ask questions and have a real interaction. I also think that there is a demand on kids now to be multifaceted. They aren't only interested in a kid who, colleges that is, in a kid who does very well on the standardized tests, and those are being eliminated to a large. Well, the standards have changed and the game has changed. And I think that high school kids and college kids don't really know what is demanded of them right now. There isn't a clear-cut structure. And they are, they're a little bit lost, which I think is okay, because if you're not lost in your 20s, you will have a hard time if you're in your 50s and you become lost.
You're right.
I think that that's fine. I think the 20s should be a time of exploration and failure and resilience and building up life skills.
Right.
But I do think that there's a lot of pressure on the young people to perform, and get a job and support themselves and blah, 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 the whole thing. I think it's happening younger and younger, but the kids are taking a longer time to grow up.
Right. They really are. The first thing I noticed, this was maybe 5 or more years ago, was that kids were turning 16 and not wanting to drive. They didn't want cars. They didn't want to get their licenses. And I thought to myself, I lived my whole young life, my whole childhood waiting for that driver's license. I couldn't wait to be free. And that's where I really started to notice that these kids are changing. They lack the same drive or motivation that, we had when we were younger. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have a lot. But, as I said, I live in New York City. So kids are not so excited about getting their driver's license anyway. I mean,
Right.
most kids don't get it until they're 17 at all.
Right.
And there are New York City kids that don't want to drive at all, or have a driver's license that they haven't used for 10 years. So I think it depends on where you live in the world. I think in California, it's essential to have a car and a driver's license, so I don't know if those same values apply to other parts of the country.
Right.
I do know that the need to grow up presents both anxiety and fear and confusion for most of the young adults that are experiencing the challenges right now. Very, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, how can parents help their kids through this? Parents are going through it too, but how can they help their kids?
Are going through, well, is this my life? Is this what I want? Do I have an opportunity to change as well? I think that parents can be open about their struggles as well as kids' struggles. And, I think the best way to communicate is certainly through honesty and not to be judged. If a kid is having, trouble, that's fine. How do we get from one side to another without experiencing some kind of grief and anguish? I mean, life is not a smooth scale, where you just go one way and it goes all the way up. There are lots of bumps in the road. And we have to be resilient and teach resilience to know that it is okay to fail. I think that's the biggest, in talking about this, Randi, I'm thinking that what is the biggest lesson? I think that it's okay to fail. It's okay to take risks within, with certain capacities without doing something harmful to yourself. But take risks and fail. because that is the only way that you are really going to learn in an experiential way.
And it helps that when these kids fail, that they do have the support and love of their parents,
No
rather
judgment.
than the being called on it every single time, you know? So I guess that's another thing parents can do is just really meet your kids where they're at, support them with what they're going through. Don't judge, you know?
Right. No judgment.
Yeah, I made it a habit with my kids to never judge ever, because I grew up with a narcissistic mother. And so, of course, everything was judgment and guilt and everything like that. And I felt when I started parenting that the best way to keep my kids safe in this world was to have an open and constant dialogue with them. And the minute you judge them or react to the things they're telling you, they clam up and they won't talk to you. So I think that's really important.
It is very important. And I think that goes for early in life as well as, you know, when children begin to go to school. I think it's really important in childhood that you do not judge your kid for what he can do or can provide or how he can better your life. And take time, because I think that is so important in developing self-esteem, that you praise your child for doing the right things internally, but not necessarily for, you know, for being the tallest one at the playground, or the biggest one in the playground, or that, you know, that there are internal values that we can start making sure that we give our children. And that might not have been a good example.
Well, it is. No, it really is. It is.
But
you know, yeah, I
I
agree.
feel very strongly that we have to support our children, teaching them kindness and teaching them about human relationships and teaching them about trust in their early childhood days. And that's what that time is for, is to build trust, attunement. You know, your mother obviously was not attuned to you because she was a narcissist. So I imagine that must have been very difficult for you. But you learned a lesson and you gave the repeater repair. You repaired.
Right. I ended the legacy. Deliberately ended the legacy.
Important that, you know, that's a very important message, Randi, because you can change and you can end a legacy. You don't have to be in pain and feel tortured your whole life.
I agree 100%. Some people have been in pain and have suffered so many years that they don't know what or who they'll be when they let that go. And that could be very scary too.
Well, it's scary to let go of habits. And even if they're habits that harm you, they're scary to let go of. A bad relationship, someone who abuses you, or those are the hardest relationships that I have found in working with couples and families, for the one who was abused to let go of.
You're absolutely right. It is very, very common. So I would imagine that this pandemic and the stress that children are under has created more bullying. Have you seen that?
Yes, definitely. Yep, I have. I have seen a lot more bullying, a lot more mean girls. I have seen 10-year-old girls acting like 14 and 15-year-old girls. There's a exclusion. There's, yes, that is very disturbing. But I do see a lot of that. And I frankly, I think some of it is from the movies, some of it's from the media. I think social media is disastrous for helping young girls and boys develop self-esteem. You know, these TikToks aren't real. The way people look isn't real. And there is an aura of, wow, I have to step outside myself to be liked because I can't really be vulnerable or just a nice person because I don't have any razzle dazzle.
Yeah, I think a lot of the millennials are planning their success for social media. They think they're going to be successful on social media. I know I've talked to probably 5 to 10 millennials that, you know, and when I ask them, what are your goals? Oh, I'm going to be a social media star. Like,
I know. I have the same thing in my practice and with other people that I work with,
mhm,
but mainly teenagers. What do you want to be? I'm going to be an influencer.
an influencer.
It's a job.
Absolutely. And right. And it's almost kind of they think it's going to be an easy thing, a lazy man's way of navigating this world. It's not. They don't know what goes on behind the scenes to get these people to where they are. It's not an easy thing.
Absolutely.
A regular job might be even easier.
Well, I don't know. I think that's also one of the dilemmas that is going on now, that there are so many new professions. It isn't that you have a chance to be a banker, a teacher, a lawyer, a this, a that, a this, a that. There are jobs that are influencers or tech jobs that we had never heard of before.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of creativity that can go on and a lot of innovation that can go on. And that's an exciting part of being young today.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched, my daughter is 37. I've watched her evolve. She graduated college with a business degree. She's very strong in math. And she worked for Ernst and Young right away. So she got into statistics. But years later, she went back and got her data science master, which
Oh,
was something that never existed. And her husband also did the same thing. They're both data scientists. But but yeah, that was a career that did not exist.
right, exactly. And it's okay to do one thing and then 5 years later decide you want to do another thing. I mean,
I think that's important to know. I think, you know, when I grew up, the father, I mean, most mothers weren't working at the time that I grew up, and the fathers, whatever they got stuck in is what they were stuck in until they retired. And it's not like that anymore.
I was very fortunate to have a working mother all the time and a mom who was a speed skater and an athlete.
Wow.
That was a great role model for me. But I honestly, when I was young, I wanted to be like everyone else, like every other child. And I couldn't believe that I used to lie and say my mother was home. She wasn't home. She was. And when you think about it now, I mean, my God, what an incredible role model I had. You
Yeah.
know, think that I was not proud. I am now, of course, but that I was not proud of the fact that she was a working mother when a lot of mothers did not work.
Yeah. It's funny that you were embarrassed by that. But
I,
that was the norm. That was the norm. That just was the norm. Some families had one car, and the father took the car to work, and the mother was home, and that was that, you know. Uh,
and my father used to walk to work in a community where you didn't walk at that time. People didn't walk just to walk at that time. And my parents were quirky for their time in that period of time. But and I think there's an element of wanting to fit in for all kids. So I think the pressures of wanting to fit in New York City are quite different than they might be in another suburban community.
yeah.
But I have had kids that do the same thing that I did when I was a kid, that have made up stories of their family because they were embarrassed, or they don't tell the whole truth. I think that's very common. And I think that the sooner that you can admit it and know that you don't have to do that, because no one is judging you. No one is judging you except for yourself. The more that you love yourself and you can be honest with yourself, and forthright about who you are, the happier kind of person you will be.
Why do we think that other people are as hyper focused on us, what we do, what we say, as
The truth.
as people just aren't that hyper focused on us? Why do we do this?
I think there's there's an insecurity. I think that has garnered more attention because of the internet and the social media, that we are concerned about what face we want to put forward, and what content we want to display for the rest of the world. I mean, I frankly, as an adult right now, I don't care, but I'm not involved in social media where I need to be liked.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it comes from the idea of, so how many likes did you get? How many followers do you have? All of that is so detrimental to forming your own self-esteem, because there are enough things that come around naturally that you don't have to post. I have over 1,000 people that like me today. I mean, that's really hard to keep that up.
It is. I use social media for my business as well. I started using it for, to have a personal page. And what I found was, I mean, I'm highly secure. I'm mentally well. I feel good about myself and everything. Every time I would go on that page, I would start to doubt myself. I would start to feel worse, because it's like, oh, well, her husband must love her more than my husband, because look at the big bouquet of flowers he just got her, or, the piece of jewelry, or, or why are these people taking so many vacations when I'm not? It's like, it's really hard to keep your self-esteem.
Even the best of us, who are healthy and successful. I have a newsletter, and this month it's going out next week. And this month it's about FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Mm.
And this is so prominent now with small children till 90-year-olds, I guess. But everyone, for some ridiculous reason, you cannot be all places all the time. You cannot, and maybe it's not even important to do that. You have to do the things that make you happy and your family happy. And you don't have to be seen and have it posted and be in a magazine, or, I mean, whatever. I mean, to be, the most popular person in your high school or in your college or whatever. But the fear of missing out is so great that it has caused that is one of the primary experiences of eating disorders, is their fear of missing out.
Really?
Always looking out instead of looking in. Always looking out. And this is a way to control your own ability to control the world, is through an eating disorder or something else that self-harms. So, I mean, I think we have to be explicit about what FOMO is and the fear of missing out. Be explicit that the only person that you have to please is yourself and your close friends. And you don't need 300 close friends. You need 1, 2, 3 close friends. You need quality in your life rather than quantity.
I agree with you. I do. I agree with you.
We agree on a lot of things.
Yeah, because when you work with people, you see these things, and I'm seeing a lot of people whose kids, maybe middle school, adolescents, are not wanting to go to school. They're having stress about going to school. And the parents are like, what do I do? What do I do? Well, I'm not a child psychologist, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. Do you think that's because they got to be home?
Well, I think they're I'm noticing the same thing, that there's a lot more school refusal than there used to be. I think they got used to being home and doing work in their pajamas. And I think that school is more rigorous and it's more demanding than it had been for them staying home. I also think that school is more challenging. It's more challenging to have to do things in person than to have to do things in your room where you could be doing your nails while you listen to a lecture on an English lecture. I mean, you could be multitasking, talking to your boyfriend while you're supposed to be listening to something on school about school. So I think there's a lot more school refusal than there had been. Yes.
Same is true with adults. There's a lot more there's a lot more work refusal as well.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, most most people in their 20s will say, well, I don't want to be in the office 5 days a week. I'll be in the office maybe the most 3 days a week.
Right.
I can't do that. I don't want to work for this company. I go, okay.
Right, exactly. That's a small percentage of jobs that are available that allow that. I work from home and I love it, but most of my life I worked out of the home, and I just couldn't wait to get home every day. I love working from home. It's so relaxing. And
Where are you broadcasting from?
Florida.
Oh, nice.
South Florida, yeah. Yeah, it is. It's nice. Although it's kind of like in the high 50s today, which is unusual for us, but we like it. We get to wear sweaters.
Yes, of course.
We don't normally get to wear sweaters. So, so what else is there more to share with us in regard to this this issue that we're talking about?
There's probably, I could probably talk to you for hours about it, but I think it's best to chunk things and for people to concentrate on small things at a time, because that's the way they learn best. Most people can't eat the whole cake. They have to have a slice of cake.
Right.
So if I were to give you a slice of cake, I would say, first of all, kindness is intentional. Practice kindness and practice thinking about other people. Get out of your own self. I would say that try to spend as much time as you can with people that really are meaningful to you, that are intentionally meaningful to you, that are not just FOMOs, people that you want to spend time with because you're a fear of missing out on what they can give you. I mean, really, and find things that are healthy to do with friends. I mean, taking a walk with a friend is glorious. Even playing golf, if you play golf, even, taking a walk outside, going to a museum, going to a coffee shop and having coffee and sitting and talking with someone. But cherish your days and know that what you put into your days, you're going to get out of them. And if you put in a lot of caring for other people, you'll get back a lot of caring. And that's a rich life. And developing meaningful relationships is really something that should be first and foremost in your heart and in your mind for emotional health.
Yes. In regard, because I know a lot of people that listen to this are dealing with the issues that I specialize in, narcissistic abuse. And one of the major problems that they have is that they don't do anything for themselves and they do everything for others. So there has to be a balance there. There has to be that self-love first, because we can't give from a dry well, right?
The adage is always, when you're traveling with your child, put on your own gas mask first, then put it on your child.
Right.
I had a client the other day whose husband was traveling for the weekend. And I said, what are you going to do? She says, well, I have 3 kids home by myself. I said, get a babysitter for an hour or 2. Go do something, take a walk, do something for yourself. Or otherwise, you're not going to be able to have anything to give to your children,
right,
who are all demanding of you.
Mm-hmm.
And don't try to plan an extravaganza. Just relax. It's like people feel as though they have to plan something. Well, don't plan anything. Just have a tea party at home.
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to take care of yourself. because you have nothing to give if you don't. It's very, very important, and it's why so many people feel drained,
Yes.
because they're giving and giving and giving and giving and share, and they're not getting. So there has to be that balance as well. But your point about thinking about other people is really important, because we do need to get out of our own head. It doesn't mean that we get out of our own self-love. We have to have that self-love first. But we should get out of our head, and so that we're not just worrying and thinking and, with all this anxiety. Because when we're sitting alone and we have nothing to do, that's what happens. I know years ago when I was a stay-at-home mom, I started volunteering for hospice, because I realized that as I sat there, I was really feeling bad about myself. I was like thinking about things and worrying, and I'm like, Randi, get out of your head. You got to do something. So that was a great release for me. And yeah, you're not thinking about yourself when you're working with people in hospice.
You're not. And you're not thinking about yourself when you're thinking about people in need in general. You just aren't.
Mhm.
And it's a wonderful way to feel better about who you are. So it's a plus plus. It's a win-win. You're helping someone who needs you, and you're also at the same time reaping the rewards of doing that.
Right. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you.
Enjoy this
So
stuff.
you have a website, right?
I do.
What is your website?
Dr. Smerling at drksmerling.com.
Okay, perfect. And do you see
You can just
clients?
put my name in and you'll be directed to my website.
Okay. Do you see clients virtually, or are you just seeing them in person?
Both. I see both. I see that was one good thing that happened for me, is that I got very comfortable doing things virtually, but I still prefer to see people one-on-one if I can.
Mhm. Yeah, it's real important. I used to just do it over the phone. You got to see you got to read them. You got to see people's faces. So I thank you so much. This has been really interesting and stimulating. I learned a lot from you.
Oh, I'm sure I would love to be able to connect with you again.
Yes, definitely. Do you do any writing? Do you have any books or anything like that?
Writing, as a matter of fact, I honestly am very excited about it, but I just got a book contract.
Oh, lucky. That's not easy to do.
So I'm in the process of trying to work on finishing that within 3 months.
Did you
So
have an agent that helped you do that?
I did. And but that's very exciting. And so I am writing, I'm working virtually, and I work in person, and I have a busy but very fulfilling life.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, when your book comes out, I know it takes the publishing process takes a while, and I really applaud you for getting a contract, because I've written books and I've been unable to. So I've self-published and promoted myself, but that's a huge feat, especially nowadays when so many people are writing books. That's great. Yeah. So what is the topic going to be? Do you want to share that?
It's about families and the same kind of thing, building a foundation.
Okay, great. All right. So when that comes out, you'll come back and we'll talk about your book.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. Tell Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell Alex. Alex is your promoter. Okay. Yeah. Tell him to contact me again. It's great talking to you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Now, have you written anything that I can read too? Shall I Google you?
Absolutely. I'll show you this one.
I don't know what that says. I can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Close Encounters of the Worst Kind, second edition. The Narcissistic Abuse Survivor's Comprehensive Guide to Healing and Recovery.
Oh, that sounds really good.
It is good, if I may say so myself. Yeah, this is the second edition, and if you do, I'd be happy to send you a copy. So
Send me a copy and you
yeah.
can.
I'll sign it and send you a copy. When we get when we stop recording, I'll get that information from you.
Yes.
But yeah, I'll be happy to send that to you.
Thank you. This
You're
is such.
welcome.
Thank you, Randy. Bye.
Okay. Goodbye. Thanks again.
Bye.
Have a good day.